We are so fortunate when you look at, and I will briefly tell you who's on this panel, and then of course you're going to hear from them individually. But anyone that knows anything about the law, and we're also now talking about people who actually, for the most part, also engage in litigation. You have some of the premier lawyers across the nation from coast to coast that have given of their time to be with you and be here for you this morning. And so before I even call their names, I'm telling you right now, give them all a huge hand. So the way we're going to do this, I am going to give a brief introduction of each of the attorneys that are here, because as they even come up to speak, I just want you to know somewhat of who's here. And then after, and each will give a brief presentation about an area that in some respects is important to them, and hopefully will be an area that is important to you and will give you some insight. But the bulk of this conversation we're hoping to have with you and the panelists. And when we get to that part of it, which will be right after the last of the panelists gives you their welcome, we're going to go to the microphones. And let me just say now, you can ask a question, you can make a comment, you can give a quote, you can do whatever. But there are several things that we require. One is that you be brief and respectful of the fact that we're trying to get to as many people as we can. Two, be respectful of the National Action Network, Reverend Sharpton, and everything that this organization tries to represent. Because what we try to do is bring equality, decency, and humanity to the world that so many of us have suffered in so many ways, but have committed to fighting to making a better place. So respect that. And three, that try to say or do something that people can actually be responsive to. And again, just be respectful of everyone, including someone else who may be asking a question. So with that said, let me jump right in, and I believe I'm just going in alphabetical order. So let me begin. Lisa and the person that I'm reading about can hold their hand up so that you can know that that's who I'm speaking about. And again, you'll get to hear from them. And of course, this is in alphabetical order, not in the order that they're necessarily sitting in. Lisa Bonner. Ms. Bonner provides counsel for large media companies, film distribution companies, music, television, and film producers, independent artists, producers, writers, and publishers. Ms. Bonner also advises clients in the digital media industry and represents book authors and print magazines with respect to their traditional print outlets and digital portals. Ms. Bonner speaks extensively on current legal topics, is a frequent legal contributor on various television programs, and provides legal editorial coverage for various print and online news outlets. We welcome you, Attorney Bonner. John Burris. Mr. Burris is best known for his work in the area of plaintiff civil rights. His Oakland, California-based practice has represented hundreds of victims of police misconduct throughout California. His firm has also represented clients in class action employment cases and criminal matters. Most recently, he handled the case of a Los Angeles homeless woman beaten by a California Highway Patrol officer, and Oscar Grant, who was shot to death by a BART police officer New Year's Day in 2009, which they also made a film of. He is a founding board member of the National Lawyers Guild National Police Accountability Project, and he is a frequent lecturer and speaker about police, criminal justice, race and gender issues. And he's a publisher and has a book that's a real primer called Blue versus Black. I recommend that if you haven't gotten it or read it, you should, because it is very, very helpful. Welcome, Attorney John Burris. Randy P. Davenport. Prior to beginning his own practice, Mr. Davenport clerked in the appellate division of the Superior Court of New Jersey and worked as an associate at a major New Jersey law firm practicing insurance defense law. In addition, Mr. Davenport served as an assistant dean at Seton Hall Law School in Newark. Mr. Davenport has served as a trustee to the Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers of New Jersey and presently serves as a volunteer attorney for National Action Network. Mr. Davenport mentors many young attorneys and at-risk African Americans and also hosts our regular Thursday Legal Night, which is expanding across the country in the state of New Jersey. Welcome, Randy Davenport. Judge Faith Jenkins. Judge Jenkins is the host. You can go ahead. Judge Jenkins is the host of a new syndicated daytime courtroom show, Judge Faith, which will enter its second season this fall. Prior to taking the bench, her legal career spanned over a decade in New York, where she was a Wall Street litigator before becoming a criminal prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. She graduated ranked #1 in her law class from Southern University. Welcome, Judge Faith Jenkins. Donna Lieberman. Donna Lieberman has been Executive Director of the New York City Civil Liberties Union since December 2001. She has also served as the Associate Director from 1988 to 93, Founder Director of the NYCLU Reproductive Rights Project 1990 through 2000. Under Ms. Lieberman's leadership, the NYCLU has expanded the scope and depth of its work, supplementing and strengthening the pursuit of litigation, such as the major stop and frisk case here in New York, Floyd versus City of New York, with an aggressive legislative advocacy and a field organizing program that works on behalf of civil liberties and civil rights. Welcome, Donna Lieberman. Pamela J. Means. Ms. Means is, Attorney Means, is a partner in St. Louis' largest law firm, Thompson and Coburn. She was the first African American in the firm's history to be elevated from associate to partner. Since joining the firm in 1996, she has represented clients such as Furniture Brands International, Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, and many others. In addition, she played a significant role in the land acquisition for the extension of the Metrolink in Illinois. Pamela is current president of the National Bar Association. She was sworn in as the organization's 72nd president on July 31st, 2014. In addition, she served as vice president of the NBA from 2011 to 13. Welcome, President Means. Jonathan Moore. Jonathan Moore has been a partner at Block, Levine, and Hoffman since 2006. His area of practice is civil rights with a focus on police and governmental misconduct, employment discrimination, First Amendment advocacy, and international human rights. He has successfully litigated significant cases both on behalf of individuals and as class counsel in cases involving systemic misconduct in police departments in New York and throughout the country. Presently, he is representing the family of Eric Garner, who was killed by police right here in Staten Island in 2014. Welcome, Jonathan Moore. Judge William Billy Murphy, Jr. Judge William H. Billy Murphy, Jr. is the founder and senior partner of Murphy, Falcon, and Murphy in Baltimore. In addition to his active trial work and ongoing caseload, Judge Murphy also serves as the informal elder statesman of the firm. In the courtroom, he is known as an expert litigator with a calm and calculated approach for getting to the truth. His 1998 victory for boxing promoter Don King became a legendary case in sports history and garnered widespread attention throughout the nation. Judge Murphy is most energized when battling the powerful to protect the rights of the innocent and underrepresented. Now, I just have to pause right here, not because I have personal relationships with a lot of people on this panel, but in particular, Billy Murphy and I have, he's I don't want to say a mentor, but he's certainly been a partner to me in developing as an attorney, and just someone who I've been personally so proud to have worked with and to know, and he is someone that is just formidable, and I so thank you for being with us this morning. Joe Smelkin. For over 30 years, Mr. Smelkin Focus has been representing people who have just been pushed aside and injured. He has worked in the areas of vehicle, building, construction accidents, products liability, police liability, discrimination, and many others. He has received recognition from members of the Manhattan Borough President's Office, the New York City Council, the New York State Assembly, and the United States Congress, and he is a founding member of the House of Justice Legal Night team. Welcome, Joe Schmelkin. Nancy Erica Smith. Ms. Smith graduated from Rutgers Law School of New York, Rutgers Law School of Newark, New Jersey. I'm going too fast there. But of course, I'm New York centric, so there you go. In 1980, and shortly thereafter began employment in a labor and employment litigation firm. In 1986, she and her partner Neil Mullen formed the firm that began Smith & Mullen. Smith's dedication to and expertise in employment law has garnered Smith Mullen tremendous success since its beginning. Nancy has litigated many landmark cases, such as Slobodka versus United Parcel and Selden versus DuPont. Nancy Smith and Neil Mullen worked for over 20 years on Landano versus Rafferty, a pro bono case which they successfully obtained the freedom of a man wrongly convicted of killing a police officer. Wiley Stecklow. Attorney Stecklow is the managing partner of Stecklow, Cohen & Thompson, a boutique litigation firm with a focus on civil rights litigation in downtown Manhattan. Mr. Stecklow is the Federal Bar Association Southern District Civil Rights Committee Chair and its national delegate. Mr. Stecklow has also been counsel for the Occupy movement throughout the nation, and on September 2011, his firm, retained by Occupy Wall Street General Assembly, and organized pro bono representation for over 200 Occupy arrestees. Wiley Stecklow. Wiley is also a founding person of the House of Justice Legal Night team, and again is someone who I've grown very close to and have tremendous respect for. The Honorable Michelle Sweeting. On November 4th, (2014), J. Michelle Sweeting was elected Civil Court Judge of the 10th Municipal Court District in Harlem. Her victory made her the first woman of Bahamian American ancestry to be elected as a judge in the United States. Throughout her legal career, she has been committed to ensuring that equality and justice remain at the forefront of the legal system as an assistant district attorney, as a law clerk, to a Supreme Court and appellate division judges, and she is a regular at the National Action Network's Legal Nights. Michelle Sweeting. That's our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Give them another big hand. And as we begin to hear them, I'm going to tell you, we'll have a lot more to say, a lot more to talk about. But right now, let me, because I know that she's now she's got to get back on the bench, as they say. So let me have Judge Michelle Sweeting come and address.
Good afternoon to the House of Justice and the people of justice. We must certainly, Attorney Hardy, give him a round of applause. This is the annual convention, but he does this 365 days of the year. He does it tirelessly. He does it with kinetic energy. He does not operate on Chronos time. He operates on the time that the people need. And so we thank you, Attorney Hardy, Reverend Al Sharpton, the entire board of the National Action Network, Veronica Dunlap, who has text tweeted and ensured that all of the panelists are here and in their rightful places, as well as Ebony Riley and all of the volunteers who you see around the room. I, as Attorney Hardy had introduced you, I am a civil court judge, but I'm sitting on the family court. And many have asked, well, how is it that a family court judge can be here at the House of Justice? I said, well, the same way in which I rose up in the House of Justice. Once one rises, one comes back to the place that planted the seed, and you ensure that the people know that their voice has been heard at the polls and that their voices are also heard in the hallways of the courthouse. As a family court judge, it is an honor and a privilege, although elected civil, to sit in the family court because, as the panelists will give in their presentations, it's the family that's the fabric of the community. It's the family, whether it's our sons, our brothers, our mothers, our sisters, who are impacted by what happens in our legal system. The family court, I've noticed in going to family court, one of the things that I hope in the limited time that I have here today is to dispel some of the myths about the family court. The family court, many have experiences where they say they waited for a really long time, only to go into the courtroom and that was the shortest time that they had. That while they believed that they had a case and had documented all of their elements on paper, either someone did not read it or they read it and did not understand it. The family court, to my surprise, is one of the only courts here in the state of New York where you can walk from the street, file your petition that day, and there is no filter between you and the judge. In other words, once you walk into the family court, file your petition, that day, your case will be heard by a judge. The big difference between that and, say, a criminal court case is that you first have to meet with a police officer who can make a determination as to whether or not your case should go forward or not. Your case can then go before a district attorney who will make a determination as to whether or not your case should go forward or not. Not so in family court. You walk in, file your petition, and that day your case is heard by a judge. The number of cases and the types of cases that are heard in family court are also very different. Many have the impression, by show of hands, that it is a chaotic place where the only types of cases that are heard are people fighting over money, and the hidden tool or the hidden pawn in these cases are the children. I'm here to assure you, not so. In the family court, the types of cases that are heard include orders of protection where there are family members who are in dispute or have disputes among family members, but you do not want your family member to get arrested. What you do want are resources. What you do want is to have a third party. What you do want is to have a third party who understands some of the nuances in our families. They understand that your son may not be acting right, but certainly you don't want to place that call, because placing the call for 911 may result in the son who was acting out perhaps being shot and killed, or there being some unlawful interaction with police. So I see families who are in turmoil, but we have, quote, victims who are torn between, do you call out for help or do you suffer silently because you don't want to have that interaction? I am here to tell you that in family court, orders of protection are heard by judges. You can file your petition that day, be seen by a judge that day, and some of the issues that families have are heard in family court. Here are some of the other issues that are heard in family court: immigration law cases. You've heard by way of background that my ancestry is from the Bahamas, but most certainly my roots are deeply planted in the village of Harlem. But oftentimes there's a number of people who have migrated to this country in search of a better life under the age of 21. They're filing for guardianships to ensure it evolved out of sex trafficking of our young people. There are protections and procedures in the family court, not in the federal court, but in the family court. There are also many of you as elders may want to seek to have a guardian, either of an elderly parent or of a child. Those cases can be heard in surrogate's court, but they're also heard in the family court. Here's another bit of history as we think about changing the image of the family court. Jane Bolin, the first African-American woman to be appointed a judge in the United States, served in the family court. So when I think about the family court, I'm here to assure the people that we have in 60 Lafayette, the part that I sit in is called Part 3. Part 3, when they first assigned it to me, they said, well, we haven't had a Part 3 in a while, so there may be some kinks. But I'm going to turn to Judge Faith because her name represents what I understood it to mean. And that is, I said, I'm covered by the blood in this part. Those 3 parts stand for the Trinity that will ensure that if ever I forget where I am, I have the number Part 3 in my part. I have above my head, in God we trust, and it's because of that, on whose shoulders I stand, that I get to sit in the family court. So I'm here to say, our panelists will speak about the law and the social justice issues. One other social justice issue that's directly correlated with the family court is raising the age. I need not mention McDonald's. I need not mention the parallel of we transitioned from the women's panel to the social justice panel, where so many of our young girls are without leaders, without role models. It's all done for a purpose, and the purpose is uniting and keeping the family together. Again, I thank you all. I thank National Action Network. To God be the glory. Service will be done at 60 Lafayette. Thank you.
Judge Sweeting. Now, let me just say, I'm gonna go from side to side, not in any particular order, but so as all of these attorneys are so, you can't say how well they are always prepared to be called. So let me bring Attorney Lisa Bonin.
Well, good morning, and it's so great to see everyone. Firstly, I want to thank the National Action Network for allowing me this podium and the chance to really speak about what it is that I'm very, very passionate about. As I sit amongst my esteemed colleagues here on the panel, and I recognize that each of them are very esteemed litigators, you all might be asking, what is that girl who works with entertainers? What is this girl who works with movies and films? What does she have to say about what is going on in our community? Actually, I have to say a lot about it. I am a black girl from St. Louis, and I grew up about 5 miles from Ferguson. Before Ferguson started, I have been, as we all have been, victims of racism and victims of unnecessary searches, seizures, stops, and all of the above. When I went to New York University, I really thought in my heart of hearts that I was going to become a litigator. So I did all of my studies, not in intellectual property where I practice, well, let's say most of them, most of my studies in racial justice issues, in issues that are affecting the majority of the people in our community, which is unreasonable search and seizures, police brutality, unlawful stops, et cetera, et cetera. As my career took off and actually just veered me from the course that I had to follow what I believe that God had led me to do, which was to work in entertainment. That might sound a little bit, what do you want to call it? It might sound a little vain. It might sound a little bit not important enough to what we do. But it's interesting because I have transformed that, and I use my platform to write extensively about the issues that are affecting the members of our community. I'm a contributing columnist for Ebony. I have written extensively for the Griot and other media outlets. And my cause, and I believe that my calling here, is to work with a lot of the victims and the victims' families and to shine the light in the media, use the power of the pen to really discuss and really bring to the forefront those issues that are affecting our community. And so, with that I say, I know we have a lot of people to speak here. So, for instance, I am working with the family, with the mother of Michael Brown, Leslie McSpadden, and keeping her story in the media. I am working with other people that have really come to me to utilize the power of the pen, to utilize my knowledge with respect to sponsorships and endorsements and other things that might really happen, because you have to realize that a lot of these people do not, this fame and this celebrity is thrust upon them in the most unlikely, in the worst circumstances. And in that instance, we do have a lot of people that want to hear their story, that want to tell their story, but it's really important that it be told with integrity and it be told with some truth and with a purpose. And that purpose is not to sensationalize what it is that we are talking about and what it is that the media perceives that we are seeing, but actually get down into the nitty-gritty and tell the truth of the story. Work with the victims' families, make sure their rights are protected, and make sure their stories are told with honor and dignity. So with that, I will step aside and call back Mr. Michael Hardy, but I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for keeping this, thank you for being here, thank you for keeping Michael Brown's memory in the forefront of your thoughts and prayers, and all of the other victims of this senseless violence that we've experienced and we've seen in the media recently. Thank you.
Well, let me move out west because so many people, again, know his work, has seen his work. Certainly the Fruitville Station was a film that was based on the incident of Osta Grant. Let me bring Attorney John Burroughs.
Thank you. It's a good pleasure to be here with you. And as I left Oakland the other day, Walter Collins happened, and it was deja vu all over again in many ways, because my practice is one of representing victims of police brutality in all levels. Since Michael Brown was killed, I've had at least 6 murder cases by the police with unarmed black men, Hispanic men. And so the beat goes on. And as I thought about this case, I finished the case 2 years ago, received no headlines. No one knew anything about it because he was not well known. There was no camera. But this young man was shot 3 times in the back. He was running away, much like the case we see now. I could not get the U.S. attorney, nor could I get the local district attorney in any way to consider prosecution of that officer. And in fact, that officer, in another case I had just killed another young man 6 months before. And so that's 2 homicides in a short period of time that lives were destroyed, families were hurt, just like the families you see on TV. And that pain I see almost daily on a routine basis. When I left Oakland this week, on Monday, I had a young couple of a man been tased over 9 times and had died as a consequence of that. So these are the challenges that are still here, and that I've certainly been part of this aspect of trying to reform police agencies, along with Jonathan Moore here, it's a real challenge because the question is, what can we really do to bring about the change of the culture that exists? I wrote a book about this a few years ago. It's still pretty relevant. I've been involved in a number of major cases where we tried to reform the police department. In Oakland, we have a case called the Oakland Riders, which was 4 officers who were riding herd on an unlawful manner around the city of Oakland. We sued the city. We were able to get a substantial judgment for them, but more importantly, we got a series of reforms. And frankly, we're now starting to see some real changes there. We've had the shootings are down, the beatings are down, and the racial profiling, which is one of the things I want to talk about, is at the centerpiece, to me, of what's wrong with policing. And that is where African American men are stopped based upon their race as a substitute for probable cause. Many of those cases occur that no one knows about except them and their families. But what happens is they ultimately can destroy a person's life because they can wind up being arrested because they didn't fail the attitude. They get into the criminal justice system. They get convicted for resisting arrest or assault on a police officer, and their life is then detoured. And so it's a major fight that we're involved in terms of looking at the issues of racial profiling. One other subject I'd like to talk briefly about, which is also important, and many of you will see and have seen about mentally impaired people that have been shot and killed by the police. I've been involved and may have 5 or 6 of those cases. I do have 5 or 6 of those cases in my office right now. We just argued a case last week before the United States Supreme Court, where we're really trying to say, when you see a mentally impaired person, a police officer, that you ought not assume when you make that contact that you should treat this person as a felony. When a person is mentally impaired, shouting and screaming at them is not the way they're going to get compliance. And so we're in a process now of trying to teach departments, teach police officers that there's another way to handle these cases. Hopefully the Supreme Court will likewise see that you must, in fact, make some kind of reasonable accommodation when you're dealing with mentally impaired people. If you can, you ought not shoot them first, to get compliance. The worst part of what we see often, in many cases throughout California, a family will call the police for help. My son, my family member is acting bizarre, he's acting crazy, having a psychotic break. But what happens? And they want help. They want help. And what happens? They kill the person. And that happens routinely. And so part of the area that I'm concerned about now is how do you deal with the question of getting the police to appreciate that you can't and should not treat mentally impaired people as if they're felony criminals, that you must expect that they might act in a bizarre way if you confront them, if you use force, if you yell and scream at them, or if you charge them. More recently, I had a young man who was acting really bizarre. The police, he's circled. They had him under control. The police then send a dog from behind, attack him. He then fights off the dog, and then they shoot and kill him. So those are the kind of things that we're most concerned about. Now, those are litigation-type cases that we're involved in, but the bigger issue, the policy question, is beyond the individual case. And the policy question is can you, in fact, change the department so they learn how to treat people in such a way, like we have done in some other cases. We've done a lot of work on pattern and practice. I kid a little bit about that from time to time. But pattern and practice is more important to me than the individual cases because you're trying to change the policy. You're trying to change the culture of a department as to how they address themselves to certain kinds of issues. So I'll answer questions later, but those are the kind of issues that we are trying to address in the West Coast. But many of them have national ramifications as well. Thank you.
All right. As I said before, she's the head of the New York City Civil Liberties Union. But again, as anyone that has seen Donna work knows that she is on the ground, tough as nails, smart as nails, and always ready for the fight.
I wanted to tweet a picture of John Burris telling us like it is, and Michael interrupted me. I am so thrilled and honored to be here. I love being in the House of Justice uptown, and I love being in the House of Justice when we move downtown. So thank you. and I have to warn you, I have so much to say, so you're going to have to just shut me up, because I also want to respect you. I know you have lots and lots of questions. And just to make one thing clear, we're the New York Civil Liberties Union, and we are the New York affiliate of the ACLU. We are part and parcel of the ACLU, and so we bring justice, or at least we try, to people all over the country. You know, our mandate is all the fundamental rights that we all kind of count on, take for granted, and fight for year after year after year, day in, day out. They're the rights that as we sadly have to say, never stay won. I just want to spend 30 seconds just talking about what you may not know about the stuff that we do. Of course you know that we fight for racial justice. Of course you know we are all over fighting for fair and just policing, for the police to do their job and protect everybody as if they are their own families, not just people who look like me. And we are there fighting for the right of every child to go to school in a climate that supports them, that respects them, and provides them the education that they need to go out and become productive citizens or non-citizens. We also fight for everybody's right to practice their religion. We also fight against the government when it tries to protect more than other religions a preferred religion, when it promotes any religion, whether it is in schools or on the streets, whether it becomes a favorite of any religion. And that's really, really important, because I love universal pre-K. I really, really do. But let me tell you something. I will never stand by and support a program, a part of a program, where kids are told that you can pray in school. You can pray at home. You can pray in church. You can pray in temple. You can pray in the mosque, right? But when you go to a public school, I don't believe that teachers should lead you in prayer. I really, really don't. Because if they're leading you in prayer, they're not leading me in prayer or my kid in prayer. And everybody's freedom of religion depends on government being neutral about it. Okay? So I just had to say that. It's one of my peeves with the mayor, who I like on many other issues. And when we talk about access to justice, let me tell you some of the things that we're doing, and we need your help, even if it's just going online, becoming a member of the NYCLU in addition to NAN, or just becoming an e-activist, so that you can be an armchair radical, you know, write to your senator just from your computer or cell phone. Raise the age. You heard about it just a few minutes ago. As a society, how dare we treat a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old who screws up, who does something wrong, as if that child is an adult? How dare we? Well, there are two states that do it, North Carolina and mine. All right? New York and North Carolina stand together, treating kids, babies, as adults when they do something wrong. We know that they are not adults. We know that they have potential, and we have absolutely no right to throw them out by pushing them into the criminal justice system because they are still learning. This is an issue that imperfectly was part of the governor's agenda, right, and was compromised out of the governor's budget. We have not raised the age in New York. We should raise the age in New York, and everybody here should be telling the governor, should be telling the Republicans who control the state Senate, should be telling every prosecutor that we know who claims that they stand for justice but have torpedoed this kind of legislation for years and years and years, that it's time to do justice for our children and raise the age. It's time for us to raise the veil of secrecy that surrounds policing and government in so many areas. To name a few, the Eric Garner grand jury, shrouded in secrecy. We saw it all on video, but they won't tell us how on earth a grand jury that would indict a ham sandwich could not figure out a single criminal charge to level against a single one of those officers who killed that man. We all know about stop and frisk. No, it hasn't gone away. It's declined for sure. Thank you, that's good. It's not, don't thank them, thank us that it's gone down. But we have the evil police policy of broken windows policing. Let me tell you, in the 1960s, there were 700,000 people in our state and federal jails, and the lion's share of those prisoners were white. White. Now we have over 2 million prisoners in our state and federal jails, and the lion's share of those people who are in our jails are people of color, okay? This is not an accident. This is the product of decades of the war on drugs and broken windows policing. So we have to hold every prosecutor, every law enforcement who comes to talk to us and look good because they came to NAN or wherever they come, everybody who says they're for justice, broken windows policing is a lot of bull. And we have to get our kids a safe environment in schools. That means a safe environment when they make a mistake so that they don't get arrested, they don't get handcuffed, right? They don't get thrown out of school, whether it's Eva Moskowitz's pseudo schools and you should read that Times article yesterday about how she treats her kids in schools, okay? The fancy, anyway. No, read it. I mean, it's incredible. Shame kids is the way she works. I turned my stomach. Anyway, we have to ensure that every kid has the right to go to school in a safe environment and that they have the right to learn, okay? That they have the right to learn how to think. Not how to take a test and fill in a bubble, how to think, okay? And let me tell you, and then I'll shut up, I promise. The governor's attack on the teachers' union is an effort to impose high-stakes testing on our kids and on our tests, on our teachers, and those tests have never been validated. They don't measure how smart a kid is. They measure how well they learn how to fill in the bubbles. That's not critical thinking, that's not education, and that's not justice. Okay, thank you.
Tell it like it is. All right. As I said earlier, Randy has been leading in many efforts in New Jersey in terms of his practice, but also in terms of his work with National Action Network. We've been privileged by that, and let me bring Randy Davenport.
Thank you. Just a few words here. Primarily for the last 20 years or so, I've been practicing in the area of criminal law. I was born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, came up in the 70s and 80s. And basically at that time, it was a situation where we didn't have many police officers of color on the force. So I'd be walking home, and police officers would stop me because I'm coming from school and I have a book bag. So they want to know what's in the book bag. They want to check my bag. They checked my bag, didn't give me any type of warnings or whatever, that I didn't have to consent. Of course, there was never anything in the bags. That happened to me on a few occasions. On other occasions, one in particular, I was walking my dog, and the cops came up. The dog started barking at me. So they pulled their gun out and threatened to shoot my dog. Another occasion, I'm standing literally on the corner in front of my house. My house is on the borderline of two cities, East Orange and Newark. The East Orange police came. All of my friends were from East Orange. I was the Newark boy there. Asked you where you live at. I said right there. So they just threw me in the car, took me around the corner, and literally almost choked me to death. So it's against that backdrop that I became interested in practicing in the area of criminal law. And basically, coming from Newark, I've seen a lot of my friends, my boys, they end up in the system, they end up going away for a long time. People leave home, and some of them not guilty, leave home in the morning and literally don't come back for 20 years. So I say all that as a backdrop to my experiences coming up in Newark and having friends and family coming up in Newark, and then practicing in the area of criminal law in Essex and Union counties, which is Elizabeth, East Orange, Irvington, Orange, basically the inner city areas of Newark. Been doing it for about 23 years now. And so when I think about criminal law, why I became engaged in the area of criminal law, it was because I didn't want to see happen to others what I saw happening to me coming up, as well as what I've seen happen to many, many clients over the years who were basically stopped and charged for nothing. So when we talk about criminal law and your kids leaving in the morning and not coming back home, or in order to get them back home, you have to pay $10,000 or $20,000. Again, sometimes because they're arrested for nothing. What can we do once we find ourselves in this predicament? What we can, and I'm not going to be long, but what I always like to emphasize when I get up and speak to audience of this nature is that as parents, I think it's incumbent upon us that we advise our children. If you are ever stopped by the police, what do you not want them to do? You don't want, they got to say something such as their names, their address, a date of birth, but you don't want them giving any statements about any incidents that they may or may not have been involved in. Because you don't know from what perspective it is that these police officers are coming from. You may sit there and try to talk yourself out of something and find yourself talking yourself into something that you can't get out of for a long time. And I don't care how tempting it is as parents, the parents of juveniles, parents of young adults, parents of adults, if you get the call, especially juveniles, and the police want to talk to your kids, you shouldn't let them. You shouldn't let them. If the police say, well, all you got to do is let them talk, and we're going to make sure that they can get home, we're going to ask the judge to let them out, we're going to ask the judge to set a low bail, we'll talk to the prosecutor for you, don't do it. Don't do it. Because they may be telling the truth. They may ask for a low bail. They may ask the prosecutor to let them out. They may do that. But in the meantime, you've just built the case up against them. So while you'll see them in the short run, it could be that you won't get to see them for a long time in the long run. So we got to not always think with emotion when we find ourselves and our kids in this situation, and we got to look towards the long game. We got to look towards the long game in terms of trying to get our kids back, trying to get our kids back home to us. And just something else, and again, I'm going to sit down in a few. When you have telephone calls with your family members who may be locked up in the jail or in the prison or whatever the case may be at the police station, don't talk to them about what happened. Telephone calls are being monitored, all right? The telephone calls are being monitored, and you tell them don't talk to the guy who they're in the cell with, their friends in the cell, tell them to keep their mouth shut. Because those guys are there because they got problems, and if they can give the prosecutors any information on some murder case or whatever the case may be, then they're going to do it, and guess what? Your boy's going to be sitting on the witness stand testifying against you, telling the jurors what it is you said to him about this case. I did it, I didn't do it, or even just making stuff up, saying this is what took place. Letters. They write these letters to you. Tell them don't write about the case. You don't write about the case. Every single thing is being monitored. Now, when I first started, there was basically, it was a situation where when the females got in trouble, it was a kind of an easy path out for them. All the guy had to do was take the weight, whatever the case may be. It's a different game now. They're starting to lock these females up. They're starting to lock these females up. So don't think that just because you're a female, you're going to be able to get out of it. I think the game is changing, and with the females have just as much jeopardy as the males do nowadays. So that's all I'm going to say for now, and I'd like to thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, Randy Davenport. All right, well, you may not, and if you haven't, I should say, seen her show, you have probably, or if you haven't seen her on her show, let me say, you probably have also, may have seen her with Reverend Sharpton, because she's a regular on Politics Nation, and they be kicking it all the time. Judge Faith Jenkins.
Thank you so much, National Action Network, for having me here this week. It is truly an honor to be in the presence of all of these brilliant legal minds sitting up here on this podium, and I've enjoyed listening to all of you here today. And I started my legal career about 12 years ago in New York. I moved from Louisiana. I knew 3 people in the city, but I'd got an offer from a large law firm and moved up here to work. And I know that Ms. Means was the first African-American lawyer in her firm to make partner. And let me tell you, coming from a large civil litigation firm, that is no small feat. When I started, I was the only black attorney. As a first year, I was the only black attorney in my entire group. And so I stuck it out for as long as I could. But it was a wonderful experience, a challenging experience. But you all know you grow the most in the most challenging times in your life and in your career. I grew a lot. Towards the end of my years as a civil litigator, I decided to take a pro bono criminal appeal. And it was a criminal case stemming from Manhattan. And I always thought, I knew I wanted to go and do trials. I knew I wanted to go and do more in my career than just work at a big firm deal where money was the bottom line in every one of our cases, right? How much would our client have to pay? We wanted them to pay as little as possible. And so, but I knew I wanted to do more in my career than just that. And I always thought perhaps I'd do criminal defense. Well, I took this pro bono appeal and worked on it with one of the partners in my firm, and we lost the appeal. But it was at that point I realized prosecutors really have a lot of power in our criminal justice system. And I decided I was going to take, after doing some research and talking to a few friends of mine that left and became prosecutors, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. Prosecutors make decisions, and when I went to I was a prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and I went, and people would ask me, well, why do you want to be a prosecutor? You just want to lock people up? That's what prosecutors do, right? Prosecutors make a lot of decisions about people's lives. Plea deals that they offer, sentencing ranges that they recommend to judges, whether or not a case goes to trial. And you need people with different backgrounds and experiences and perspectives in that role making those decisions. I had a case in New York. You know, New York has very strict gun laws. You might remember Plaxico Burress. Was he a Jet or Giants? Giants, New York Giants football player. One of those teams. I'm from Louisiana, so he was a New York Giants football player. The standard for having a loaded gun in New York, if you're caught with a loaded gun in New York, the standard recommendation from our office was 2 years in prison. So Plaxico Burress, he got 2 years and he shot himself, right? That's how strict New York is with their gun laws. He didn't shoot anyone else, he shot himself. Well, one day I had a case come across my desk, and it was a 17-year-old girl from Harlem, and she was caught with a loaded gun in her backpack. And the case came across my desk, and African-American girl, and her attorneys brought her down to my office. And this is why I took that job. I'm going to tell you, because other people, other attorneys in my office, they would have had no problem recommending 2 years to that child. And I wasn't going to do that. She came into our office and she sat down with her attorney and they talked to me. She didn't have a record. She didn't have a past. She made a wrong decision. She was dating a boy who was not a good kid. And he gave her the gun to carry and she put it in her backpack. And I said, we're not going to ruin this child's life for making this decision on this day. And so we worked out a plan for her, and she never saw a day in jail. And to this day, that young lady is thriving and doing so well in school and going on and working hard. That's why I took that job. And we talk about everything going on now with the police and with stop and frisk. Living in Harlem, and this is when you see things for yourself, and when cases come across your desk, you know what to question. You know how to scrutinize certain things. I was walking home in Harlem one night, and I saw 3 teenage boys standing outside on the corner, minding their own business. One was listening to music, another was texting on his phone, and the third one was eating his sandwich. And it was late, and I was walking home from work, and I was standing in a bodega, but I could see clearly outside. They weren't doing anything. So I was waiting on my sandwich, and I saw a police car pull up, and 2 officers get out of their car. And I don't even think they said anything to these 3 kids. They just started going in all of their pockets, going in everything, pulling everything out. These kids were so immune to this, it didn't faze them. I'm standing looking at this horrified, right? How would you feel if someone walked up to you and just started reaching in every single pocket you had? This one kid, I'll never forget this, he was so unfazed. He had been eating a sandwich. As the police officers digging in his pockets, he never stopped eating his sandwich. He just keeps eating, right? Because what are you going to do? Are you going to say to the police at 17 years old, are you going to say to the cops, don't touch me, I haven't done anything wrong, and risk being charged with resisting arrest and spending the night in jail? Or do you just want to go home that night? What are their choices? And so when I got cases across my desk, I did look at them, and I did scrutinize them. Why did you stop this young man at this time on this night? What did he do? That's why we need more prosecutors with different perspectives and with different experiences, bringing those experiences and those perspectives to the table. And I just want to say one more thing, because I am a legal analyst for MSNBC, and I want to say something about the Walter Scott case. Because we covered the Zimmerman trial every day. We covered the Michael Dunn trials every day. And we covered Eric Garner, Michael Brown, and now we're covering Walter Scott. This is what, a lot of things about this case concerns me, but there's one thing in particular that should concern everyone. Before this officer knew there was a videotape, his police report said the exact same thing that every police report says when officers claim their shooting is justified. But now we know in this case that was a lie because there is videotape. How many others are there? We don't know about, we will never know about because there's no tape. The standard for questioning police misconduct cannot be there's either pictures or videotape or what you're saying isn't true. That cannot be the standard for holding our officers accountable. And I have one more thing to say about this. We talk about body cameras and the need for body cameras because they will make officers think more. They will make them reflect, think carefully about what they're going to do. But we need to change the culture and attitudes that certain individual officers have when they police certain communities. Because you should not just do the right thing because you think you might be caught on camera, because you think somebody might be watching. You should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. You should do the right thing because you recognize the humanity of the people you are serving. You should do the right thing because you want those people to go home to their families as much as you want to go home to your family. So we have to change the culture and the way some of these individual officers think when policing our communities. Thank you.
Judge Jenkins, let me do this now because, we're also running against the clock. I keep seeing people flashing, and we still got a ways to go. So let me try to keep it moving, as they say. But let me do this. Let me bring, because many of you, particularly those in New York City, know how significant the whole fight against stop and frisk was, and I just want to have Jonathan Moore come. He was the lead attorney on the case before Judge Schindlin here in the federal courts, and this is an area that has been so important to so many. Let me bring Jonathan Moore.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the National Action Network for having brought together such an esteemed group of lawyers. When you hear a lawyer say, I just have a few words, then you know you're going to be here for a while. So I promise I will say just a few words. But it's great. This is a panel about law and social justice, not just law. There are plenty of lawyers out there who will take a case of abuse, a case of a child who was killed by the police, an accident case, any kind of a case. There's plenty of lawyers who will do that if they think they can make money. What makes the lawyers on this panel different is that they're not interested just in income, but social justice. And that's very important. In the stop and frisk case, for instance, we had we've been litigating that case since 1999. Remember what happened on February 4th, 1999? Amadou Diallo was killed. He was shot 41 times. And that was a stop and frisk. That was a stop and frisk. That's what first directed our attention to it. And we've been fighting for now 16 years for significant change within the police department. Not just a declaration that what was done was illegal, but to really create mechanisms and systems that change the culture. And we all know that's difficult. But what is the saying that the race is not necessarily to the swiftest, but to those who persevere, right? And we persevered. After 15 years, we went to trial in 2013, and in a federal court down in Manhattan, a 10-week trial, and we were able to secure a finding, not only that the police department was engaged in stops and frisks in violation of the Fourth Amendment, but that they were doing it because of race, that they were engaged in racial profiling. That's a significant accomplishment. In fact, it was an historic accomplishment. And the reason we were able to do it was not just because there was good lawyers working on the case, and we worked on the case with the Center for Constitutional Rights and with a private law firm, Covington and Burling. And every once in a while, you get that perfect storm of the right historical time, the right lawyers, the right facts, and you achieve a significant result. And we did. But we did not just because we had good lawyers, but because it was part of a social movement. And that's why the National Action Network and other organizations are so critical to our work when engaging in law and social justice, because we would not have achieved the kind of result we achieved had that courtroom not been packed every day for 10 weeks by community groups like Communities United for Police Reform, and by the work that has been done for years and years by groups like the National Action Network. Only when our work is connected to a social movement do we really then begin to see positive change. So keep that in mind when you're looking for a lawyer, because you have an issue that really you think is broader than just your own personal issue. You need to look for lawyers who are committed not just to making money, but to really doing change and seeing that change come through. It's unfortunate that that doesn't happen overnight. We'd like to see. I mean, when you saw the Walter Scott video, and you look at it and you say, how could there be any disagreement about what happened here? And that young man, not young man, he's 50 years old, and if you see him running away, I mean, you tell me that officer couldn't run up to him and catch him? I mean, he just pulled out his gun and shot him because he, for whatever racist, lazy reason he had. But but that doesn't necessarily mean that case is over. Yes, the PD charged him with murder, but what's the prosecutor going to do? So don't just think because he's been charged with murder that case is over. I mean, let's face it. My client, I represent the family of Eric Garner. There was a video, right? And he wasn't running away. He had his hands up. And what happened? You know what happened. They presented that to a grand jury over weeks and weeks. They did a secret trial, in a sense. They allowed those police officers to get up and lie. And you know how they did it? They gave them all immunity, other than the one officer. How could they do that? He wasn't killed by one officer. He was killed, the medical examiner said, by a combination of chest compression and neck compression. All those officers were on top of him, but they gave all the officers except one immunity before they even started. So we knew what was going to come down the road there. So it's important that we stay vigilant, even in a case like the Walter Scott case. Because we know, as the judge said, had there not been a video, we know what would have been said. He was engaged in a struggle. They had to pull the weapon, and he shot him. And it's terrible, and but it was justified use of force. It really makes you have to question every police report and any encounter between the police and people of color, that they're not being honest in what they write about, and they're not being honest because they know they can get away with it. They know they won't be prosecuted. They know they won't lose their jobs. In New York in 2011, at the height of stop and frisk, they were doing 700,000 stops and frisk every year in New York City. 700,000. And when you sit back and you're trying to measure, to some extent, your worth as a lawyer, they're now at least reported, at least in terms of what they're documenting, they're now documenting less than 50,000. So they're doing 650,000 fewer stops and frisk, at least what they're reporting. That's an incredible achievement. That when you combine law and social justice together, that you can achieve. Now, I would note also that during that time when they dropped from 700,000 to 50,000, the crime rate didn't soar. It didn't go through the roof. There was an increase in crime. What does that tell you? That they were doing bad stops all along. And yet, who has been punished for that? What police officer has lost his job? Ray Kelly, we had testimony from Ray Kelly at the trial. He said, the reason we do stop and frisk, these are from Ray Kelly's mouth, testified to by Eric Adams, the borough president of Brooklyn. He said, Kelly said at a meeting with him and Governor Passon, the reason they do stop and frisk is to instill fear in the minds of young black and Hispanic men that every time they go out in the street, they will be stopped. How could he get away with that? He's now got a nice big fat pension from the police department. No officer has lost their job for the fact that the police department was found guilty of engaged in racial profiling over a period of 10 years. So it's important that we look at these struggles not as just the immediate goal, but there's a long-term goal here. We have to have systems that really begin to adequately discipline and supervise and monitor police officers. And we can't it's just not a result. It's got to be a long-term change. So, as I said, I just have a few words. So I'm not going to say any more, but I do have to comment on one thing, and it relates to the Walter Scott case. And I don't know if you watched New York 1 this morning, but my client, Esau Garner, was on. They interviewed her, and she said, she was commenting about the fact that Mayor de Blasio came here yesterday and complimented the police department down in, North Charleston, South Carolina, for acting so quickly. And she said to the reporter, she said, well, it's been 9 months since Eric Garner died. What police agency, what district attorney, what U.S. attorney, what anybody has done anything about his death? And the answer is nothing. So the struggle continues.
Thank you, Jonathan. And, I should add, I don't know, is Corey Wise in the house? Corey is, and many of you may know, one of the victims in the Central Park Five, who was both exonerated and then recently. And I just wanted to add that Jonathan Moore was, again, in a long struggle to get justice for the Central Park Five. All right. Well, she is in St. Louis, and right there in the heat of so much that has happened. As I said, she's the current president of the National Bar Association, President Pamela Means.
Thank you, Michael. In 1925, when African American lawyers could not join the American Bar Association, 11 men and one courageous woman did something that most attorneys would not do today. They didn't file a lawsuit, stage a protest, a die-in, or a sit-in. They decided to start their own. And they called it the National Bar Association, built on the premise of ensuring justice and equality for all. Charles Hamilton Houston said that an African American lawyer had the choice to be a social engineer or a parasite on society. This year, some willingly, some being drugged, have been returned as members of the National Bar Association to living out the creed of Charles Hamilton Houston. I came to serve notice on you that we are no longer parasites on society. We are the social engineers. One of my members said to me, President Means, we are not a social organization. No offense. We shouldn't be focusing on that police brutality and education. And I served notice on the brother You wouldn't be representing the folk you representing in entertainment if there was no Charles Hamilton Houston, Wiley Branton, Thurgood Marshall, who prided themselves on being social engineers. I also came to apologize to you because for years, black lawyers have forgotten that they were social engineers. We slept on the job. Y'all ain't got to clap if you don't want to. I'm apologizing because perhaps we wouldn't be at the place we're at in education. Perhaps we wouldn't be at the place we're at in police brutality. Perhaps we wouldn't be at the place we're at lack of diversity on the bench had black lawyers in the National Bar Association been doing what the 11 men and one woman did in 1925. So we sorry. But when you wake up a sleeping lion, watch out. Because not only will the lion hunt, the lion will bite. And so today I came to let you know that when we started this bar year, we started with a focus on education. Because we understood that a damaged educational system leads to the things that we see in mass incarceration and police brutality. Any educator worth their salt and gold will acknowledge that the school to prison pipeline, that mass incarceration and police brutality is a self-fulfilling prophecy of the school to prison pipeline. We fix that, we fix half of the problem. And so the National Bar Association took the report of the Education Department, understanding that African American children are disciplined at a higher rate than any set of children, with Missouri being the #1 offender. We started a pro bono program where we represent African American students at suspension hearings for free. We joined forces with the Education Leadership Council, whereby we find law firms who are socially minded who will underwrite the cost of filing lawsuits against states that refuse to carry out their constitutional duty and educate our children. Finally, we're going to head to LA to have a conference. But what LA don't know is we're going to help attack their zero to no tolerance policies. And we're going to take them down. Y'all got to realize this is personal for me. I have 4 children. They are 14, 9, 6, 4, and 4. 14, 9, 6, and 4. And they're all in public school. Because you know why? I make a lot of money in my big firm, but I pay a lot of taxes to my state. And I choose to force them to educate my children with my dollars. We move from education to ensuring discipline and diversity on the bench, because we understood that if you don't have folk that look like you on the bench, you can be not administer justice. So when you push a child out of the school system, you're either going to take them to a police officer that don't like them and understand them, or send them to a bench that don't respect them. So we got to have some judges that look like us. Y'all clapping, but I served notice on the National Bar Association. I was rather disappointed. President Obama had appointed 2 women one out of North Carolina, one named Miss Parker, and one out of South Carolina. Don't you know we sat by and allowed the Republican Party not to issue this rule that don't exist called the blue slip, and not to allow them to even get a hearing? And instead of them getting a hearing and being seated on the bench, President Obama removed their name. Y'all ought to say, you my brother, but brother, you need to keep them right where they are until they get confirmed and on the bench. Say what you have to say, because they may not invite you back next year. So we fight for diversity on the bench because we recognize that if the bench is not diverse And I'm not just talking about folk that look like us. I'm talking about folk that are diversity in thought and mind, that understand, like Faith said, I'm not ruining this child's life. I'm going to give them another chance. And so we call out those we like and those we don't like. I say somebody ought to tell the brother, you shouldn't have never moved Jennifer May Parker. You shouldn't have never moved Allison. Y'all don't like that when we hold folk accountable, but we got to stop it. That's why we where we are. We moved from diversity on the bench to mobilization and voter protection. Look, y'all, stop saying that voting is not a solution to the problem. It is not the solution, but it is a part of the solution. If you don't believe me, look at Ferguson. It went from having one African American on the bench now to being 50% African American, and hopefully in 2 years we can get the mayor out. And so the National Bar Association, without the coverage of media, because sometimes we ain't got to always be seen attorneys to do what we do, we went into the streets 2 weeks ago and we knocked on doors and we told folk not who to vote for, but just to get your behind out and vote. Why? Because we're social engineers and we have an obligation. I felt embarrassed that I've been practicing law in 18 years and Ferguson was allowed to exist. I failed Ferguson, so I had to make up for my failure. In the end, I didn't choose police brutality. God chose it for me. I became president and we had an initiative. We have a 25-state attack on police brutality. Before there was a Mike Brown situation, we have sent open records requests to 25 states that have a high population of African Americans and a high number of police brutality. No, there's not a national database. Shame on the Justice Department. Shame on the Congress. Shame on the Congressional Black Caucus that we don't have one. Y'all ain't got to invite me back. Our initiative did that so we can get the data, so that we can prove to the Justice Department and Mr. Holder that there are some states that have a practice and a procedure of brutality, and we want to give him a report and say, Mr. Holder, here are the states that are practicing and doing things that ain't right. You need to go out and investigate them before they let you out of office, because they don't want to confirm her because they want to really keep you in. So since they going to keep you in, I might as well you take advantage of you. Second part of our initiative is that we do what is called a Know Your Rights form. And we go around. You can't attack a location unless you're willing to help a location. So we go into the community and we talk about what your rights are. What are the issues in that area? And we pass out these little Know Your Right cards. We begin to educate. Let me tell you what my lawyers found out. They found out that while you defending these cases, you are so separated from the public, they don't even really know who you are. The reason they don't contact you to represent them because they think you are untouchable. Y'all don't like that, but it's the truth. And so we educated them. Part 3, we advocated for laws. And I'm about to take my seat. We advocated for laws on the state level, the local level, and the federal level. You know what? On the local level, we said, because you can't get everything done in one place. You got to break that thing up. On the local level, we said, look, Mr. Police Officer, contrary to popular belief, you work for us. We don't work for you. You have an obligation to protect and preserve us, not to police us. I should be able to approach you, say my rights, and not be fearful that you're going to take my life. And so what we said was, stricter mental health testing, mandatory de-escalation of force training, mandatory race and educational training. On the state level, mandatory independent investigation of all police-involved shooting, mandatory separate prosecution of these cases. Missouri, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi have adopted our laws. Y'all ought to tell New York, get on board, New York. On a federal level, and I'm going to sit down, but I got to say this real quickly. I'm sitting down, I got the wind up. On a federal level, y'all keep on looking at Michael Stacker, but somebody ought to tell Clarence Haberts, the black police officer that didn't do nothing and didn't write the correct report, baby, we coming after you. On a national level, what you ought to say is there ought to be definition placed to escalation of force. You want to know why they don't go to jail? Because the Supreme Court said in Corner that an officer can elevate force to that degree that he or she believes is reasonable in order to stop the force against him or the public. The standard is arbitrary and capricious. It's all about, that's why you hear, I feared for my life. Tell Clarence, our laws say mandatory de-escalation of force training, mandatory definition to de-escalation of force. And then you tell Clarence we got a law that says make it felony police brutality for another officer to watch a police officer commit a crime of police brutality and do nothing about it. We're going to issue a press release that says we want Clarence indicted and removed from the force today.
President Pamela Means. All right. Well, needless to say, all good things must come to an end. So let me first, because obviously there's Joe Schmelkin and Nancy and Wiley. We didn't get to you. And Billy Murphy, who is here, he promised me that, you know, if I did one thing, he would not have to say anything. So as we wind up, because we're going to switch the panels, on behalf of Billy Murphy, let me just say a $276 million verdict in First Vision Bank, $185 million verdict in merry-go-round, $55 million verdict in the Ballantyne Electric case, $55 million verdict in St. Joseph Hospital, $44 million verdict in police brutality, $34 million verdict in carbon monoxide, $11 million police misconduct, $5 million police misconduct, and $100 million plus in Lloyd's of London and other cases against banks. Billy Murphy, Judge Billy Murphy.
I just want to do three things before I sit down, and it'll take a very, very short amount of time. I want to thank black people for putting the roof over my head, putting the clothes on my back, the food on my table, and I want to alert you to two things that we have done that won't take more than 30 seconds for me to explain and alert you to. Number one, if you want to know how to train your kids to deal with the police, we produced a video for that. It's called The 10 Rules of Dealing with the Police. You can get it on the internet. It's cheap. We made it that way so that everybody could afford it. The 10 Rules of Dealing with the Police. If you want to know how to pick a lawyer, which is, you know, the most difficult thing that we have to do, we got on our website all of the things you need to know at murphyfalconmurphy.com about how to pick the right lawyer, because your lawyer needs to be good enough for you, not good enough for them. last but not least, we have started an organization. I'm the third president of this organization called the National Black Lawyers. We work very closely with the National Bar Association. And in order to be in the National Black Lawyers Top 100, you've got to be one of the top 100 black lawyers in the United States. And so if you want to find out who the top ones are, go to our website, the National Black Lawyers Top 100. And in addition to that, we have, and it's an invitation-only organization, and so if you want to know the top 100 lawyers in each state, we have a division for that. And if you're looking for a young lawyer, I know some of the black ladies out here like to get these young lawyers. If you're looking for a young top lawyer, the top under 40 lawyers will be on that website as well. God bless all of you, and thank you very much.
All right. William H. Murphy, thank you. Thank all of you. Give all of the attorneys a big, big, big hand. Let's give them a big hand.